You're 8 years old. It's 4:37 in the afternoon. The house is quiet in that specific way a house is quiet when there's no adult in it. Not silent, exactly, just unattended. The fridge hums. A car passes outside. You make yourself a snack. You do your homework, or you don't. Nobody will ask. You watch TV with the volume low, because at some point you learned, without anyone telling you, that you should not take up too much sound. And here's the part you didn't notice at the time, because nothing felt unusual about it. By the age of 8, you already knew how to be alone for hours without anyone wondering where you were. You already knew how to handle a fever by yourself. You already knew which moods to stay out of the way of, and which ones meant it was safe to come into the room. You weren't neglected, exactly. You were just on your own. If you grew up like that, you've probably been called mature for your age more times than you can count. Independent, an old soul, the easy one, the one who didn't need much. And it's worth saying clearly, because almost nobody says it, those words were not compliments. They were descriptions of a child doing a job, the job of raising yourself. What we're going to talk about for the next few minutes isn't about blaming your parents. Most of them were doing the best they could with what they had. But there's a real thing that happens to a child who grows up parenting themselves. A specific shape it leaves in the adult they become. And once you can see the shape, a lot of things about your life start to make a different kind of sense. In 1973, a Hungarian-American psychiatrist named Ivan Bazarmenyi Nagy gave this a phenomenon a clinical name, parentification, the reversal of the parent-child role, a child who instead of being cared for becomes the caretaker of a sibling, of a parent, or most often of themselves. There are two kinds. Instrumental parentification is the practical version. The kid who makes dinner, gets the younger ones to school, manages the household around an absent or overwhelmed adult. Emotional parentification is the quieter, more common one. It's the kid who learns to read the temperature of a room before they learn to read a book. The kid who becomes their mother's confidant at age 9. The kid who absorbs a parent's anxiety so the parent doesn't have to feel it. You weren't asked to do this. There was no conversation. You just noticed that the adults around you needed something. Calm, space, a competent kid, and you provided it, and you got very good at it. So good, in fact, that nobody around you ever realized a child was doing the work of an adult. That's the part that lasts. In 1998, two researchers named Felitti and Anda published a study at Kaiser Permanente that would become one of the most cited papers in psychology. It's known now as the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. They asked 17,000 adults about what their childhoods had actually contained and then tracked their adult outcomes. What they found, in plain English, was this: the things that happened to you when you were too young to defend yourself don't just fade. They show up later, in your body, in your relationships, in 100 small habits you can't explain to anyone, including yourself, and emotional neglect. The kind that doesn't leave bruises, the kind nobody outside the house would ever have noticed, turned out to be one of the most predictive of all of them. Not because it was the most dramatic, because it was the most invisible. A kid who is hit knows something is wrong. A kid who is simply not seen often grows up assuming that's just what the world is. So they don't ask for help. Why would they? Nobody answered the first time. They don't expect to be chosen. They expect to be useful. They don't trust softness. Softness was never a survival skill. If any of this is starting to feel like it's about you, you might want to subscribe. The next video in this series picks up exactly where this one ends. But before that, the part that's hardest to hear. Children who raise themselves don't grow up. They grow sideways. They become capable, often impressive adults, high-functioning, dependable, the friend everyone calls in a crisis. But somewhere underneath the competence is a developmental phase that never finished. A part of them that's still 8 years old, still in that quiet house, still waiting for someone to walk in and notice them. And because that part never got what it needed, the adult above it doesn't quite know how to receive love when it finally arrives. They flinch at it. They distrust it. They earn it instead of accepting it. And they spend a lot of years wondering why connection feels harder for them than it seems to for everyone else. It isn't harder because something is wrong with you. It's harder because nobody ever taught you what it feels like to be held. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. The Swiss psychoanalyst Alice Miller wrote a book in 1979 called The Drama of the Gifted Child. The title is misleading. She didn't mean gifted as in talented. She meant gifted as in attuned, hyper-aware. The child who developed an exquisite sensitivity to other people's needs because their own survival depended on it. These kids, Miller said, grow into adults who are extraordinarily perceptive. They walk into a room and know within seconds who is upset, who is tense, who needs space. They are often the therapists, the artists, the writers, the people others go to in the dark. Their childhood pain didn't just damage them. It also built something, a kind of emotional intelligence most people will never have. But here is the cost Miller named, and it's exact. The gifted child grows up performing for an audience that left the room a long time ago. They are still trying to be good enough for parents who, in many cases, are no longer paying attention or no longer alive or were never going to notice in the way the child needed them to. They are competent in the world and starving in private. And the strange, quiet truth of adulthood for someone who raised themselves is this: nobody is coming. The parent you needed at 8 is not going to walk into the room now. That ship has sailed. But there is one person who can finally walk into that quiet house. You. The adult version of you can do something the 8-year-old couldn't. You can go back. Not literally, but in the way that actually matters. You can be the person who notices when you're tired. The person who feeds you something warm when you're sad. The person who says out loud you don't have to earn rest. You can just have it. The person who lets you be small sometimes instead of always competent. Therapists call this reparenting. But you don't need the word. You just need to understand that the child who raised themselves has been doing the work alone for a very long time, and they don't have to anymore. There is finally somebody home. You are allowed to be the adult who shows up. So tell me, honestly, what does the 8-year-old version of you wish someone had said that nobody did? And if any part of this landed somewhere tender, the next video in this series goes deeper into what happens to those kids when they grow up and try to love someone. It's the one I think you're going to want to be around for. I think you'll see yourself again.